Welcome to the Tuesday Review. I'm Nathan, as always, joined by Callum and James in the studio. How you going, guys?
Good.
Okay, so tonight it's a bit of a different one. We're talking all things, especially a God-themed episode, right? Because we have the action God, the one true God, and Moon Knight, which is about gods.
Fair enough. Yeah, I didn't think
okay.
of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair enough. Yeah, we're doing a three-pronged review. Like a round table, but just three main
Specialized,
sort of some bigger releases that have come out recently. But before we get to that, just in case, letting listeners know that the Apple link on our Anchor homepage is fixed. So if you go to the Anchor homepage and under the Where to Listen tab, there's a Spotify link, the Apple Podcast link, which is fixed now and is updated. And then there's the RSS link, so you can copy that into the RSS link into your podcast app if you listen somewhere else. We don't have Google Podcasts. I don't know if that's something we can get set up.
I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, but for now the Apple link is fixed. But most people are listening to this right now, so it doesn't really matter. But we just thought we'd mention it. We're gonna do three sort of big release reviews that we missed in the last few weeks. Moon Knight, Top Gun Maverick, and the unbearable weight of massive talent.
Yeah.
Should we do Moon Knight or Top Gun first? Because I think we'll talk about them longer than...
I say we start with Moon Knight, a big juicy one to get us going.
That's fair enough. So Moon Knight, obviously... When they announced, Disney announced they were making, the next MCU show is going to be Moon Knight. Way back when they announced it was like after the Netflix shows had been cancelled, which technically weren't part of the MCU or whatever. And we were all like, well, Moon Knight would be perfect for that Netflix style show because not only is he violent, but he's crazy. And not just like, Batman's a bit nuts. Like, Moon Knight is
certifiably insane.
Actually, he's actually mentally ill as part of the canon,
And so we were like, I know a few years ago when they announced it, we were speculating. It's like, maybe since Disney now owns Fox and Hulu, they could put it on Hulu and they could have like a darker MCU. Then they could they could bring Punisher back and put him on there. But as we've seen... with the MCU, everything is connected and they seem to have no plans to make a more adult sort of side spin-off kind of universe.
It's going to be interesting how because they're making another Daredevil show as well, with Charlie Cox assumedly.
Yeah.
I'm like, how are they going to change? Well, how are they going to, this is a different conversation entirely.
No, I think it ties in directly what we're talking about. The answer is it's going to be like Moon Knight. It's going to be vaguely violent in certain places, but otherwise not.
So you don't
not adult oriented at all.
So they're not going to meet. They're not. It's going to be such a tone shift, right? Yeah. You're watching the Netflix ones on Star that are on Disney Star now in Australia, and then watching the new Disney Plus Daredevil. It's going to be such a tone shift.
Yeah, and
it's going to feel weird and jarring.
I think it's a big problem because there are you can't do the Punisher in the MCU. I mean, you can, but you know what I'm saying. Like the Netflix show was the perfect.
You can't really.
Yeah.
No.
So it's like, but with Moon Knight, we saw the future of Blade. We saw the future of Punisher. We saw the future of Daredevil in how they tackled Moon Knight. It's very clean, safe, MCU.
Moments of violence.
Because it's on the Disney Plus.
But you never really see any violence.
Yeah.
Moments of inferred violence or off-screen violence or obscured violence.
Exactly. And there's no swearing and there's no sex. And so, this is the MCU. It's one thing. We're not going to get anything different.
I enjoyed the show, but I do think it was probably a little bit too clean for for the source material, for the way the source material is. It was very clean.
There's definitely a lot of cutting away and
because it correct me if I'm wrong, but Moon Knight was a part of the Marvel Knights imprint.
I think so, yeah.
Which was a bit more. It's a bit grittier.
The Moon Knight comics I read, 10, 15 years ago were extremely violent.
Because the Marvel Knights franchise is a little bit for older Obviously, everyone reads them, but it is that older. It's Daredevil, it's Punisher. It's like those edgier characters.
The darker, more,
The
generally
teen comics.
the brawler kind of figures as opposed to your Captain Marvels and such.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's interesting to see the Marvel Knights being adapted to the clean MCU.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like ideally Moon Knight would have been perfect for a Netflix style show.
Yeah.
But this is what the MCU is doing. It's all connected. It's all in the one PG-13 friendly universe.
Yeah.
So and the show was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Oscar Isaac is great. When they
perfect casting.
I mean, you could cast him in anything and I'd be on board. So when they announced him, I was like, great, I'm there.
That English accent though.
But that's kind of like
I know. Yeah,
but he wasn't born in England.
Not real.
Yeah, I know. It's fine. Yeah. It's fiction.
Yeah,
in the show.
Yeah,
it's true.
It's supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the best thing about the show is the whole like dual identities.
Yeah.
The personalities
disorder, where he's like both Steve, the British museum worker,
and
Mark, the violent American mercenary.
Yeah.
And he's switching between those. It's all fun. And the mystery of like, I like how it was like an origin story, but not, because he's already been Moon Knight for a while.
Yeah.
But we're seeing the story told from Steve's point of view, and he doesn't know he's Moon Knight. And so he's discovering that he's actually also Mark, who's also Moon Knight.
It's a good balance of what you said. Like, it's not an origin story, but it also half it is.
Because Steve
but it doesn't. We're not bogged down in that plain origin story.
Yeah,
and it's really interesting that they decided to take that approach, considering that he's popular among comic book readers, Marvel comic book readers, but he's kind of obscure if you don't
in the main.
Like he doesn't make big appearances in video games.
Yeah,
he's not like a Lego character.
But I mean, that's why this show it's well done, because it's not a boring, straightforward origin
It's interesting
story,
that they didn't take the easy route of introducing the character.
It's good. It's great that they didn't do that.
They thought out of the box. Yeah,
I did have one problem though. The CG hippo.
Oh, see, the CGI in this show is garbage. So straight up,
in particular, the hippo offended me.
Yeah,
because there's behind the scenes photos of a lady who performed as the hippo in a pretty good looking prosthetic suit.
Yeah, I saw
of the hippo.
They
CG over the top of it.
Yeah,
they do that a lot, and it annoys me.
And it pissed me off, James.
Yeah, they had a.
I'll see if I can find the photo.
I remember we talked about it with Spider-Man, where Tom Holland wears the suit the whole time, and then they CGI it. And you see behind the scenes of Tom Holland doing all these aerobatics and doing all his own stunts, and doing, the stuntman doing all this crazy stuff as well, and then they just CGI over it. I'm like, what's the point?
It's because they want the finest control possible over what they
want the finest control, and mainstream audiences have been conditioned to think that this is how it's supposed to look, which we'll talk about with Top Gun later.
In this example with Moon Knight, in this example with Moon Knight though, it's egregious because the CG, like I didn't mind it because we'll talk about the story in a minute, but the CG hippo takes place in this otherworldly liminal space type area. I'm like, I can kind of accept it in this specific scene just because there's an unreality to it. But the fact that they did have, I've seen the photos Nathan's trying to find.
Yeah.
The fact that they did have a convincing looking suit that they threw away, like you said, just to CG over it.
Yeah.
It's.
I'm showing James a photo for listeners. She's holding the costume head that she puts on when they're filming. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Put a bit more work into it.
But I mean, it depends on if it was fully articulated.
Yeah, but you don't.
It might have just been a rubber head. You don't need it
to be. You don't need it to be fully articulated. I think that we've talked about this a million times on the show. The problem with CG is it makes people not be creative anymore. Yeah. Because CG is like, oh, we'll just do it in post.
But I feel like if you're 90% there with a practical suit,
just
it shouldn't look like
crap.
Like CG, and maybe just CG animate the mouth or the eyes, but instead they animate everything.
My problem isn't so much with those kind of crazy creatures where it's like, well, you can't really do those in real life. I mean, you can with prosthetics and animatronics, but you know what I mean. My biggest problem is with things where it's like action scenes, where it's like a car crash or a guy jumping off a building.
Yeah.
I'm like, CGI flubbery nonsense. Garbage. Even the Moon Knight suit, which is a really cool design, is just CGI garbage.
I cringed when I saw the tendrils come out.
And
it's so fake.
It's just like he's like running and jumping, and I'm like, that's not a guy. That's just like a little CGI model that doesn't look real. Yeah. I'm like, they could have just had a stunt. Oscar Isaac doesn't even need to be there. Have a stuntman in a practical Moon Knight suit. The design is great.
Yeah.
Have him jumping and fighting. It would have been awesome. Yeah. But they don't do stuff like that anymore, and especially
certainly not Marvel. Yeah.
Not if you're not Tom Cruise, you don't get that.
Well, yeah, exactly.
We'll get there.
We'll get to that. There are exceptions.
Yeah.
So the general premise of Moon Knight.
Yeah.
It's about a mentally ill man finding out that the gods do in fact exist.
Yeah, Egyptian gods.
Yeah, and they have plans.
Yeah.
Basically, there's a war. A very Neil Gaiman-esque take on it, where there's like a interfactionary war, if you want to call it that, between the Egyptian gods vying for power with Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, Ethan Hawke
plays the villain trying to resurrect.
Ethan Hawke's also great.
Yeah.
Always. So.
Yeah, he's an amazing actor.
So, I mean, you've got those two.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac facing Ethan Hawke. Like, I mean, what more do you want?
That pretty much carries your show right there, even with all the problems.
Yeah, because he's a very compelling, very charismatic character. So
yeah, I like the whole like glass in the shoes kind of like self-flagellating punishment thing that he does. I like that.
But yeah, so it's essentially this battle over good and evil, where Moon Knight plays the good character.
Steve finds out he's got another personality who's Mark, who finds out is the avatar for an Egyptian god named Khonshu, who's using him to fight evildoers and to punish evildoers. And then Ethan Hawke's character, Arthur Harrow, I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
He used to be Khonshu's avatar, but I can't remember how the falling out happened, but now Arthur Harrow is looking for another god who punishes people before they even do wrongdoing.
Yeah, Minority Report style.
Yeah, so it's like this ethical question of like, can you go further in your crime fighting?
Yeah. People treat it like it's an ethical question, but I've always thought that the idea is it's only a crime when it's committed. So you can think about doing a crime. You can potentially, in the future, you could commit a crime.
Yeah.
But and that's the point of the show, is until you commit the crime, you're innocent. And so that's
the thing. It's a whole thought crime thing. It's just like, at what point do you draw the line?
It is interesting to note that, like, so Ethan Hawke's character is not inherently evil. His perspective on the battle of good versus evil is a bit chaotic. Yeah. But he's not like, he's a very nuanced character in that, he's the villain.
He wants to do good by punishing evil, but he's going the most extreme lengths to that. So all this stuff is really interesting. The character moment. It's like with all the MCU movies. We talk about it in every MCU review. The characters are great. The comedy moments are great. The banter is great. The story, line is fine. It's the CGI, the action, it's boring, bland. The show looks too clean.
Yeah, it does.
It's just, there's green screen everywhere. And it's just like, I enjoy the shows and movies. I'll continue to watch the MCU, but you know what you're going to get. Yeah. And it's nothing.
I feel like obviously they don't cut corners, and it's not.
I think they do though. That's the problem. They spend so much money.
That's
on
what I was
gonna
say. If I feel mean saying they cut corners, because everyone on that production would work so hard.
They can't blame it on COVID, because this happened before COVID, and it'll happen when COVID's no longer
but I know I've mentioned this on the show, so listeners, I'm sorry, but let's not forget how egregious it was that they green screened an entire bar.
Oh, and
in Black Widow, like
Captain Marvel.
It would have been cheaper to rent
both.
It would have been cheaper to rent a bar for.
Exactly.
My point is,
finish your point.
My point is that unfortunately, CG just doesn't look as good as real, and I know we've said that a million times.
And it's
like the fact they have that hippo's head, and like Nathan said, have the head on, CG the eyes on if you want.
Yeah.
You can, like we've talked about before, it's the CG you don't see, which what makes the product.
Yeah.
You could do it in a million ways without making it an
That's the
entire
thing.
model. Like
Yeah.
flubbery
Just
That's
look
the
at
thing.
it.
It's so obvious, and that's why it
the
sucks.
hippo is so obviously completely 3D.
Because it looks
And
like it's a
it's
PS3
CG. Then
model.
why-
But like I said, it's not just the hippo.
Yeah.
If it was just the hippo
Yeah.
and
It'd be
the
like,
crocodile
okay,
lady,
yeah.
which I didn't like the design
But it
of
was
that
also
either.
it was also the hyena things. The
Yeah,
those
but it's like
creatures.
those things. It's like
And all the
okay,
action,
It's,
yeah.
it's like okay, but it's everything else as well.
It's
like
even flipping cars and
like
stuff,
Mark
yeah.
is having a knife fight with a guy, and it's just like clearly green screen. And it's just like just cameras shaking, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Did you even try?
Yeah.
The answer
exactly.
is probably
No.
not. But then you see the behind the scenes and you see like Oscar Isaac working really hard and you see all the stunt people choreographing. I'm like, so clearly there's some care. And
They were
thought
used as
put into
reference
it.
for the CG.
But yeah, exactly. That's the problem. That's the problem. And the problem with the MCU as well is they have such a high turnaround
yeah.
that they just have to churn this out. Oh, it's not good enough. We'll fix it in post. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And it's a big problem, even though, like I said, I enjoy for the most part, because, it is an enjoyable watch.
Yeah, it's good. Like you said, the characters carry it. The story carries
Yeah.
it. The character interactions
The whole,
carry it.
ancient Egypt thing that's enough to set it apart from all the other shows.
Even the relationship, like the relationship between Mark and his wife. What's the wife's name? I forget.
Oh, crap.
Layla.
Yes.
Layla. It has its problems. Like they don't set it up, in my opinion, that well. But even the way that changes over the arc, even that carries it forward.
It's a weird thing because all the MCU shows so far, I felt probably could have been movies, but also in saying that, I'm like, but then you lose a lot of the character moments and the growth and stuff. So it's like this weird trade-off where I'm like, Moon Knight
It doesn't work either way.
It was only 6 episodes. Well, I'm like, you could have done a 2.5 hour movie, would have been fine. But then you're kind of like, well, they didn't even really flesh out a lot of things. But then that's probably just a problem with the way they write these, where it's like they're releasing them week to week, so it always has to end on a bit of a cliffhanger or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they waste a lot of time in these shows, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of filler, even with just the 6 episodes.
I would have loved a movie of Moon Knight resolving.
I think a movie would have been better.
Resolving the core problem, but I'd love a TV show exploring the other gods. And the avatars of the other gods.
The other gods weren't even shown.
Yeah.
There was a big fight scene that happens off screen, which I was like, oh, that's not cool.
They could call it Avatar, and it could be all in 3D.
Please don't make me mad. I'm mad enough.
My point is, like, it's such a rich world, and like I feel like they should spend their time playing with the richness of the world for a TV show.
Yeah.
And like you said, the core story plot is kind of simple.
Yeah.
You could just take it to a movie, 2.5 hours.
I feel like they could have done.
But they won't do that.
I guess because he's not a big name.
He's not a main
mainstream.
Avenger, yeah.
Yeah, they probably. But I mean, he will eventually show up because it's all connected. I did find the ending of the series to be very anticlimactic.
Yeah,
where
definitely.
it's just like, okay, everything's done, and then he's like, I'm going to stop being Moon Knight, and then the after credit scene, they introduce his third personality, Jake, and I'm like, well,
yeah.
why that
Has it been confirmed for season 2?
I don't think so.
That's like,
and see, I'm
then
like,
who
what
cares,
are they
kinda?
doing? Like, I feel like the big problem with the MCU is because of the.
You have to leave the people wanting more.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we talked about Doctor Strange. It's like Doctor Strange wasn't a movie; it was a trailer for another movie in the future.
That's a problem symptomatic of all the Marvel movies.
It's all the Marvel. It's all the movies.
It's
and
everything
shows.
Marvel,
I'm not. I'm not just picking on Moon
It is
Knight.
comic books, you know.
I mean,
Well,
yeah, again,
yes,
that's part of the.
Yeah, yes and no. You can't just have a good standalone or whatever, and that's
It's not DC. This is Marvel. Let's remember. They don't do great standalone. Marvel doesn't do great standalone.
And yeah, and they like I said, they introduced enough, but then it's like at the end you get like the Jake tease and you get the Frenchie tease, which is Moon Knight's like Alfred equivalent.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, is there a season 2? Is he going to show up in a movie? Like, I feel like they're just.
I guess we'll see.
I think the MCU is almost too big now, and there's too much stuff going on, and it's like they're just like planting seeds.
They need to rein it in a little bit.
They're planting seeds on the hope that in 5 years they can get Oscar Isaac back and he can do a bit more. It's like, well,
Yeah,
What was the point of this then?
I know they are suffering from success. It's too big now.
Yeah.
Artistically suffering
But
from success.
we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'll watch the next
Yeah.
MCU thing. Like I'm not.
Yeah, definitely give it a
But-
watch if you're into the MCU. But
It has the
whatever you're
problems of the
expecting, you're
MCU.
probably gonna.
It has
get.
the problems it has.
you've listened
it
to
has
one-
the issues that we have.
If you've
with-
listened to one of our MCU reviews, you've listened to all of them because it's always the same. It's like, oh, character's so funny. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
Crap. Yeah.
problems. Crap action. Crap CGI. Whatever.
Moving on.
Top Gun.
Top Gun. Yeah. So obviously the sequel. It's been delayed a few times at this point, I believe.
It was supposed to come out in early 2020.
Yeah. So COVID hit this movie.
It was shot in 2019.
So COVID hit this movie pretty
I
hard.
think it was supposed to come out mid 2020.
Yeah.
Kept getting pushed back.
The sequel to the legendary, we'll say
80s iconic 80s
gay
classic.
film Top Gun.
Oh yeah, homoerotic. Yeah, like
It's not a bad thing,
so-
right? It's
so-
a product of its time, and it is amazing.
no, but
in
that's
its
the
own
thing
ways.
is, it's just like it's like it feels intentional. The
Yeah.
Well, look,
homoeroticism in the original.
it's not that it's.
But I'm like,
to
apparently
call
it wasn't. I'm
no,
like,
so
what?
It's so the fascinating thing is, as someone who I rewatched it the other night, so it's kind of really fresh in my memory.
Same.
I wouldn't call it a gay film necessarily.
No, it's
But-
not. It's just
I
it
was
has.
being facetious.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it is commonly referred to as such
Yeah.
on the, by pretty much anyone who's seen it.
Yeah,
But I think I was talking to James during the movie. Like the difference between we'll talk about the many different Top Gun Maverick in a minute, but the original Top Gun, sexual tension was dripping in every scene, almost every scene.
Yeah.
And that's why I think people feel that way because the cast in Top Gun is primarily male.
yeah.
And there's, like I said, there's that tension between all the characters because they're in a lot of scenes they're kind of naked, they're all sweaty, they're all close to each other.
Any kind of macho 80s action movie has a hint of like homoeroticism, but just a hint. Top Gun is overtly homoerotic.
Yeah.
And that's why there's all the jokes about it and the
Yeah.
parodies and the volleyball scene and everyone knows.
Yeah.
And that's why when you watch Top Gun, it's like it has to be intentional.
Yeah, because
But
it's,
apparently it wasn't.
No.
And I'm like, every
well,
time I rewatch Top Gun,
they're entitled to their opinion.
Yeah.
But I mean,
No, but
I
I'm
mean,
like,
the
even the
filmmaker,
director is
yeah,
like,
he's
no,
entitled.
no,
He's entitled to his opinion.
Yeah.
But like I said,
you shouldn't have made a gay movie. Am I right?
no, it's like I said, the men are so close to each other. They're all sweaty. They're all half naked a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And like I said, especially like Val
there's a lot of
Kilmer,
language,
the dichotomy between
double entendres.
the relationship, I guess you could call it, between Iceman and Maverick.
Yeah.
They're always close to each other. They're not enemies, but they're
Yeah.
rivals, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
And it's like the way they look, like men just look at each other across the room.
Yeah. Nose to nose is like, oh yeah, what do you take this outside?
But yeah, so like it, and I think that actually carries the movie a little bit. That kind of
There's a reason it's iconic.
yeah, the broship of it, for lack of a better word.
I feel like
And I feel like the Top Gun Mavericks, for me, one of the flaws of it is it doesn't capture that camaraderie that the first one did. And that's not because of the lack of sexual tension.
It's not sweaty enough.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I actually like the sweaty aesthetic for the original.
We were talking about this the other night where we were...
Unironically enjoy it, yeah.
Yeah, no, we were like... I said to you guys, like, I miss, like, 70s movies where it's just a bunch of sweaty old guys smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
Because now movies are too clean. Everyone's so perfect and beautiful. I miss, like, old movies where it's just, like, kind of schlubby guys, like, balding.
Elliot Gould.
Elliot Gould, like,
Long Goodbye.
Robert Duvall with, like, a bald patch, like, thinning hair. I'm like, I love this kind of... But now everything is very...
In Top Gun Maverick, no one sweats ever.
Also,
they sweat in the cockpits, but I'm like, you know what I mean?
not-
It's all very air conditioned looking, and everyone's having a nice time.
Honestly, I think one of the problems with this movie relates to what you're saying is I feel like that's not a big problem. I feel like the cast is almost too big. So you don't get as much of that one-on-one tension because there's just so many other characters.
Yes and no, because I've seen the original Top Gun quite a few times, and personally I've never really liked it that much, but I find myself going back to it, and the way I enjoy it is the way I enjoy a lot of 80s movie, classic iconic movies. Is like there's something about it. It does have this, the soundtrack is great.
Yeah, awesome.
Tony Scott's direction is very stylish and very stylized. You got Tom Cruise, you got Val Kilmer, you got Michael Ironside, you got Tom Skerritt, you got all these great. Tim Robbins even has a small role, you know, like the plane, the action's really cool, and so it does have this. You know, like there is something to.
Again,
it's just an enjoyable, fun movie,
and it's a practical movie.
Yeah, but I've never. It's never been one of my favorites. It's not a movie I consider really that good. And I think this last time rewatching the original, I realize I'm like, it's an enjoyable in a pulpy kind of way.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's just like an origin story of this cool
young
pilot
hotshot
guy.
pilot.
Yeah. And it felt like a 50s, 60s kind of like,
I feel that.
you know, pulpy kind of action adventure.
Because I could imagine an alternate universe where it's like Maverick will return in
Yeah,
Top Gun.
I mean, the fact that there wasn't
whatever, Cold
70
Heat.
sequels
Yeah.
probably is only because of how expensive it would have been to make.
Yeah.
But otherwise, this is, you know, watching the first one, I'm like, they should have made 10 of these, and it's just like the adventures of Maverick, you know, and it's just this pulpy, like Indiana Jones-esque of like, what's his next adventure? And there doesn't really even have to be a storyline. But yeah, it's like, that's what's so great about the original, even though personally I don't think it's that great. Flash forward 36 years and you got Top Gun Maverick, which in a Hollywood landscape of reboots, remakes, sequels, reboot-quills, you know, spin-offs, it's just like oversaturated. 99% of them are garbage. Most of them rely on just the nostalgia and aren't real movies, is just there. And so, you know, this movie comes out and it's like, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. The biggest selling point being that Tom Cruise in the last 10 or so years
has a death wish.
And he's just like, now he's the stunt guy. He's like, I do all my own stunts. Everything has to be big. Everything has to be real.
As much practical as possible.
Yeah.
Which we're down
And so,
for.
exactly. And that's the main selling point. Because if it was anyone else, this movie would be just be CGI garbage and I wouldn't even probably bother to see it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even that big of a Tom Cruise fan like you guys are. But it's just like, you know, a movie like this is going to be worth seeing on the big screen and is going to have good action set pieces at the very least.
Yeah.
And seeing the movie, it's like Nathan was saying, is like there's more characters now. They're more fleshed out. There's more of a storyline. I think that's overall what makes it a better movie than the original. It's still pulpy. It's still just an action adventure movie. But it feels a bit more fleshed out. It feels a bit more polished than the original.
You know what the difference is? I kind of disagree with Nathan's point because the original Top Gun's focus was Maverick trying to prove he's the best.
Yeah. The original Top Gun's like just like a training movie because they never really have a big...
This film, it does follow... Maverick is the central character, but it's more about facing consequences than anything else. It's like the relationship he had before the first movie.
Anthony Edwards, fuck, I forgot to mention him.
How
could I forget Goose? His death like traumatized an entire generation.
Yeah.
Sorry, Goose.
Talk to me, Goose.
Talk to me, Goose.
So it explores his previous relationships. You know, the fact that he never really settled down. He doesn't have a family. It like you said, it talks about Goose.
Yeah.
Like that. You know,
Goose's ghost is a specter over the whole.
And so instead of giving Tom Cruise's character a primary rival, the rival is his legacy, for lack of a better way of explaining it.
It's quite.
So, most of the character development is related to him answering the questions of his past.
Yeah.
Whereas the original Top Gun was more like you said, it's a training movie. It's a head-to-head. I'm going to prove I'm better than you kind of movie.
Although
it's a collection of little...
It's like, I know it's kind of the point, as James said, it's a pulpy movie, but there's one scene that I personally disliked in the new one.
Yeah.
Was it went just ham enough to be like, it should have gone more ham or not at all. When the scene where Miles Teller is playing Goose's son, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he's playing the piano, playing the song they play.
I'm like... So
They only could have gotten away with this if they forced Ghosted Goose in next to him, and then I would have been like, all right.
this is what I was going to say in relation to like what we're talking about and Callum's point is like the first half an hour I was very unsure because there's a lot of nostalgia. There's a lot of hey, remember Goose?
Yeah.
Hey, remember this? Hey, remember?
It was
And
awkward. Yeah.
They like the opening scene is like literally almost shot for shot like a modern version of the opening scene of the original. They reuse parts of the original score, and I'm like, okay, I get it.
I didn't like the actual Top Gun flashbacks showing the actual Top Gun film. I didn't
stuff
like
like that. It's like it's stuff we've seen before, and it's just like, yeah, okay, what is this just going to be a nostalgia trip? But I think as the movie goes on, it does deal with Maverick's legacy, and it does do a good job of Maverick is the main character. His name is in the title. But it also, and it's not a passing of the torch movie necessarily, but it does introduce a younger cast of characters that I would be interested in seeing again if they ever did more.
Rooster was a good character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like Tom Cruise handing off the baton and saying, okay, you take over.
Yeah.
But it's also not just, it's just about Maverick and nobody else kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So I think it does a good job.
It does use its ensemble cast reasonably well.
Yeah.
I do think there was probably a couple too many characters in the Academy. I think that they'd be more memorable if there were a few less. Like
Maybe,
I couldn't name them all.
Oh yeah, they could have edited the train. The training crew. I should say
there were quite a few trainees in the original.
Yeah,
but I think it's if they wanted to keep them more memorable. If they they were planning to set up a franchise, for example.
Yeah.
Right. If they wanted to keep them more memorable, they should have trimmed it down just a little bit, not by a whole lot, but also give them more memorable moments on screen instead of just the same flight stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like these characters though were a bit slightly more fleshed out than any of the characters in the original.
Yeah, no, definitely.
You know, like,
but it's also 2.5 hours long, which is good. And the original one,
it's only 2 hours 10 minutes.
2 hours 10 minutes. But the original was like what, 90 minutes? Just
no, it was
minutes?
an hour
40.
The original movie,
hour 49. Yeah.
Oh,
so it's only 20 minutes longer. This new one,
Top Gun.
But
the original Top Gun felt. Yeah, no,
the original one feels a bit longer.
The original Top Gun felt like it was over real quick.
Yeah, because it's just like a collection of action scenes and like, so I think the new one, like the first half an hour or so, I was like, I don't know about this, too much nostalgia, too much memberberry, this and that. And then, too many characters, introducing all the younger characters and Maverick has a new love interest, which is actually an old love interest and this, that, the other. But then as the movie went on, I go, okay. And then they introduced the whole Star Wars plot. It's like literally their mission, literally the pilot's... literally the pilot's mission is just you have to hit this, go down and hit this vent.
Yeah, you have to get close to the floor that's totally not the Death not the Death Star. Yeah,
and there's the SAMs, which aren't turbo lasers at all. And I'm like, okay. But then as the movie went on, I go, okay, this is... And you start to like the characters more, and they start to do things a bit differently than the original.
I did like how Maverick is like, look, I'm trying to train these kids to do the mission. Yeah. And everyone's like, yeah, but the planes are expensive. You can't do this, you can't do that. Don't be reckless. And then Maverick just being like, they don't do it this way. They're going to die.
Exactly.
And then it's like he proved it was possible. And then it's like, oh yeah, but you also broke the plane. Because it's such like I like the way they wrote...
there's a bureaucracy.
I like the way they wrote the bureaucracy because that's how it really would be. Like, that's how it probably is in real life.
Oh,
it's like, it can be done, but you've got the pencil pushers deciding whether the plane is worth more than these kids' lives.
That's the whole thing with Maverick's character is like you watch the original movie and it's like technically Iceman is right.
Yeah.
Like, it's the whole like...
I was actually saying that to Nathan yesterday. I'm like, the difference between Hangman and Iceman, because Hangman is the closest to the rival character we get in this film. Yeah. Only because he's like the rival to Goose, if you will.
Yeah.
Rooster. Rooster, sorry. Yeah, my
Goose
apologies.
Jr.
Yeah, Goose Jr., yeah. The baby duck.
Baby Goose.
But Hangman's this very kind of do things by the book kind of guy, where Rooster is the kind of...
but see, Hangman is almost... It's interesting because Hangman is like Iceman in the original, but he's also like Maverick in the original. He's just slightly more of a dick. But then he sort of comes around at the end. Yeah. And so you've got this... He's technically like Maverick, but from an outside perspective, whereas in the original
Yeah,
movie you get
yeah.
to see Maverick from his perspective. So he's
Everyone in the original
protagonist.
Top Gun probably thinks Maverick's a dick.
Yeah, because
because
really,
it's from Maverick's point of view. We don't think that.
Technically,
like,
he is.
Yeah.
Like even Callum messaged me. He's like, the original's kind of rapey.
Yeah,
And that's one of the reasons.
But it is the Navy.
Well,
A product of its time.
but
I'm sure the
whole-
Navy's different
yeah.
now.
I mean,
but,
the
you know.
70s and 80s movies is the whole no means yes thing. Is like it's not a good time for relationships and movies, females and movies. But that's one of the reasons I don't really love the original. Is like that whole love story feels very forced and strange.
yeah, he just follows a woman into the lady toilets and he's like, let's do it.
But the whole thing, and it's like at the end of the movie, it just adds to the homoeroticism because you're like, what are they doing? Like it feels unnatural almost.
Yeah.
Like most action movies have a forced love story, but doesn't feel out of place because it's like, oh, it's an action movie. You have a
We
love
all know
interest.
that the only real love story in the original Top Gun is the story between Maverick and Goose. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the real love story.
Which is kind of, I guess, what this movie's about.
Yeah, kind of.
But also, like I said, it's like the sequel does end up doing a pretty good job of Maverick dealing with his legacy, the death of Goose, the new generation of fighter pilots, including Goose's son, and how Maverick has to come to terms with that. And
and again, shout out to our boy Tom Cruise because there's not that much really egregious CGI in this movie.
That's what I want
for a plane movie.
That's what I wanted to say is. Really, at the end of the day, it's the climax of the movie, the last few action sequences that really sell this movie and that really cement it as one, for me, better than the original, and two, just a really great action spectacle film. Is just like all the practical plane, real life stunts and stuff.
Awesome.
But just the way they kept that climax going, and you're like,
we thought the ending was one thing,
but
then it switched it up,
and
then suddenly the stakes were a bit higher.
They get to
I
put
do
in some
love
Tom Cruise running.
We got some running.
Measure.
Yeah. But I do like the fact. Spoiler alert! At the end, they get a plane that it's like the same plane, the F-14 that he flies in the original.
Yeah.
And it's so old, and Tom Cruise is like, it can still fly. It's basically it's like Tom. You know what I mean?
It's like, come on.
We should also point out, as James said when we were watching it, he's like Captain America.
Yeah.
He just looks so fit.
That's Tom Cruise in real life.
No, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. The man looks so healthy.
Tom Cruise is 60 years old. And he looks, 40 maybe?
That's what I was saying. He looks like he's in his 40s. And he's ripped.
Yeah, athletically.
Built.
I was like to Callum,
incredible.
he's like the real life version of Captain America. He's peak human physical.
It's so weird because all the cadets for the Top Gun, training school,
Yeah.
they all had to do some fitness routine that Tom does. And to be what Tom says, in quotes, flight ready.
Yeah.
For the movie, because they were going up in planes.
Yeah.
They had to be able to take the G's.
Yeah, and Tom Cruise put together a 3-month training course.
And to paraphrase what Tom Miller said in an interview about this movie, Miles Teller, sorry. To paraphrase what he said in an interview, what Miles Teller said, what Tom Cruise does for fun is my nightmare.
Yeah.
They had to do what Tom Cruise does just for enjoyment. They had to do to get ready for this movie, and it's it's not good.
Tom Cruise workout routine will probably be hell to most people.
And that's why again he looks like a modern day Captain America.
Yeah, it's crazy the shape he's in, and
I mean
the lengths he goes to.
We've recently seen the trailer when this was recorded for the new Mission Impossible, and again the practical stunts look insane. He needs to be fit to do what he's doing.
Yeah, the trailer for the new Mission Impossible came out, and I said to you guys, I am a die-hard James Bond fan. I've been a James Bond fan since I was 4 years old. I love James Bond more than anything. But my God, that new trailer had me more hyped than any of the last few James Bond movies. And that's big coming from me. And again, I'm not even that big of a Tom Cruise fan, but...
Maybe again.
Yeah, when you can't deny this level of quality, in terms
Are you not entertained?
Yeah. The climax of Top Gun Maverick just put me over that last, I don't know how long, 40 minutes. It's a while.
Look, they go to the danger zone.
Yeah,
they sing about it a lot, but they go there, and it's awesome.
And I was like, that sold me. I'm like, this movie's awesome. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it, and all the crazy stunts and
heartfelt,
the jets
heartfelt
and-
emotional resolutions.
And yeah,
Like,
and
we were talking about the fact that it has everything, and it rounds everything up so nicely.
I said to you guys, I'm like, if they didn't stick the landing, pardon the pun, like, I think the rest of the movie was still just okay. But I feel like because the climax was so strong, it just elevates the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And all those other things just comes together. And yeah, I just enjoyed the whole package more than I did the original, which is a movie, like I said, I've seen.
Well, there's more
a few
emotional
times.
connection in this one than the original. The original's like basically a
It ha-
sports film
it also,
in a way.
Pretty much, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I think
And that's not bad. It's just, it's different. This was more of a action drama than a
this
sports
new one
film.
also has the advantage of using the original as a foundation.
Yeah.
Whereas the original doesn't really have anything to build off of.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, even though it's 36 years later,
You still have iconic characters you can
yeah,
draw from.
you have a whole basis to
Yeah.
a fertile ground to work with.
They have a landing
Which-
carrier they can take off from.
Which most times we talk about on the show, it's like, oh, they had all this great material to work with, and look at what they did.
yeah.
And I think Top Gun Maverick is a good example of like, look at all this great stuff. You know, all the stuff in the original, some of it's great, some of it's not. But they took it and they kind of elevated it and they polished it more.
yeah.
And like, I think if it wasn't for Tom Cruise, really, you know, this
Like
movie would be like any other 36-year gap sequel. It's like,
After CG and
nostalgia.
crap. And, yeah.
But again, it's testament to Tom Cruise. He goes to a movie and he says, "But I want to do everything practically."
Yeah.
And they know he's a draw card.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
studios
And-
say yes. Sir."
He's a
Also-
golden goose. That's right.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Joseph Kosinski, the director, who's obviously another big part of it, and
Yeah.
who directed Tron Legacy, which is another sequel that has like 30-year gap, which is a movie I unashamedly love.
It's
And-
not
It's a good
this
one.
not
No,
a bad
it's a good
movie.
one. Yeah.
And I'm like, so this guy's just good at doing the long-awaited sequels, because usually when we get a long-awaited sequel, it's like, ugh.
It's like an art form, though. You know, you have to pick your payoffs, don't you? With
Yeah.
these long films, these long
And
gap
yeah,
movies.
and it comes down to the script as well. And even though this is just an action adventure movie, I think it does do a good job of rounding everything out.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
exploring things. And
Definitely.
I did like, speaking of Star Wars, I did like, you know, Maverick still does Talk to Me Goose. And
Yeah.
then Rooster says, "Talk to me, Dad." It's like this Obi-Wan.
Yeah, it would have been
Kinda
funny
thing.
if he heard the voice of Goose.
Yeah.
It's like, go
Well,
lower.
both
Oh,
of you
yeah.
guys, both
Oh,
of you guys were like,
Or
"We need
if
the
it's
Force,
like,
Goose Force
yeah,
Ghost."
talk to me, Dad, and it's like Goose's voice being like, "That's the wrong switch in the F-14." Like, you know what I mean? Like-
The spirit of Goose takes
You know,
over the.
it's
You get the laser
It's,
shot.
it's just like it's a goose's face in the cloud. It's
Yeah.
a great balls of fire.
Oh jeez. Yeah, when one of the other planes explodes, it's like goodness, it's great possible. Oh my god.
Oh, dear.
I did like the younger cast though overall, and I said to you guys, I said, if this movie's doing really well, and if they just rush another one to production, it would suck, and especially because Tom Cruise probably isn't interested right at the moment. I don't know, he might be, but it's like in 10 years, I would be interested in a
Where are they now? Kind of thing.
you know sequel with all the
Yeah.
younger pilots, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to that
Yeah.
if they can keep this level of
I get,
quality.
like a
in
kind
That's
of
the risk.
like a
If-
kind of American Army presents Rogue One kind of thing.
Rogue Squadron.
Yeah,
That's-
it's like
but the
weird,
risk
but
is-
I want it.
if Tom isn't behind this movie, it's going to be CG garbage.
That's the thing, is like, I think,
Yeah.
like I said, the only reason it's this level of quality in terms of practical action
is because
and
Tom Cruise
stunts.
insists.
Exactly. Otherwise, it would be like every other
Yeah.
movie we talk about on this show, which is just like CGI garbage.
Anyway, yeah, Top Gun Maverick is good. Go see it.
Two
Yeah.
thumbs up.
Two
Excellent.
thumbs up. We'll be back right after this short break. You are back on the Tuesday review. The last movie tonight we're going to talk about is from our last God tonight. The one true God.
The one true God.
Nicolas Cage himself. The king of the modern day B-movie? Or like straight to DVD, straight to streaming?
I don't even know. if
The
you-
king
I
of
don't know.
Hollywood. Let's be honest.
king of
the
Hollywood,
god
yeah.
of Hollywood. The god of us all, really.
You know, and like he's sort of, you know, he's had his issues and he hasn't really been in a big mainstream movie for a while that's come out everywhere at the
Well,
theaters. And
yeah.
we thought when we went to see this movie, we were like, when was the last Nicolas Cage movie we actually saw in theaters
Like
before
big,
this
yeah.
one?
Yeah,
Like big one.
mainstream,
And
yeah.
it was like, it ended up being like Ghost Rider back in the day.
Because we were like, this is actually the first Nicolas Cage movie we've seen in a cinema in 10 years, because yes, we've seen few of his, lots of his movies coming out, but we never went to the movies to see them because either they didn't get wide release like Pig, or so yeah. Well, like I think, and I was like talking to Nathan, I'm like, I think last one was like Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. And I'm like, I remember I went to see Season of the Witch at the movies. I'm like, but that was like 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really cool to see a Nick Cage movie at the cinema.
Yeah. A good one too.
And then, pretty good one.
And I do like that whole issue is a running motif through the movie, and it's like it's good to be back. It's something I'm gonna mess this up. It's like it's good to be back.
Nick,
not that I ever went anywhere.
Yeah, Nick says that in the movie,
and I'm like, wink, wink.
Not that we ever went anywhere. Yeah, because he has this alternate alter ego called Nicky.
He argues with Nicky,
and that's the thing is
who's like the exaggerated persona of himself.
This movie, Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, is like a meta commentary on Nick Cage's career, basically up until this point, and so. The whole movie is like him reflecting on it, but it's in like a buddy cop action movie package. I mean, we all really enjoyed it. It was really funny.
Some of although we have to wait for the Blu-ray. There's one scene that they didn't include in this movie that looks amazing. Which sounds amazing.
I messaged you guys afterwards.
Yeah, because we were looking as neckbeards do. We're looking through the IMDb trivia later on, and there's a scene that we don't see in the movie where he's. Like it's like a succession of classic characters through his movies. He's arguing with or something.
Iconic characters.
No, he's
fighting. He's like fighting his way through his past characters. Yeah, and they cut it out of the movie. I'm like, needed it. Jeez. But yeah, the movie's a lot of fun. It's like Nick Cage playing even a more heightened version of his already heightened realistic self, who gets. He's in money troubles, and so he gets a paid gig to appear at some rich
guy's birthday
party, and then the guy ends up being a drug lord, and the CIA recruits
Nick
Cage to go undercover and find out where he's holding his hostages.
They've abducted is it like a senator or a politician's daughter or something like that.
Where you have to find out where he's holding the hostage before he executes her, and then he ends up becoming friends with this drug lord, and he's not such a bad guy after all. It's this whole like buddy comedy. And Pedro Pascal plays the drug lord.
He's really good in this movie.
And he's so funny.
Yeah.
He's the bit where they do the acid and they're driving in the car. So funny. So good. As a comedy, I think it's great.
I think we were giggling or smiling or chuckling at least over half of the time in this movie. Most of the time. Yeah.
Like as a comedy, it's really funny.
This is Nicolas Cage presents himself in such a, like you said, it's like that heightened way. Like he'll be like laying on like the beach or whatever, but he'll just look kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And like that's what you're looking for. It's like I think there's a physical comedy to it that's really great.
We've talked about it before when people think of Nick Cage and they think of he's a meme. He's a living meme. He's over the top all the time. He's the yelly guy. But like the fact that he's playing himself, but also like deliberately self-aware of like how people see him, and so he's playing this heightened version of himself even when he's just sitting sunbathing kind of thing.
He apparently he resisted making this movie for such a long time, and he had to get sold because in a way in parts of this movie he's playing himself.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I'm playing the dude. Playing the other dude.
Yeah, exactly. He's playing a dude. He's playing himself. He's playing an extra heightened version of himself, arguing with a heightened version of himself.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because then he has his alter ego, his younger version, like Wild at Heart version.
In an interview, he said that one of the issues he had with making the film was he had to protect himself. He had to protect the idea of Nicolas Cage, while also abusing the idea of Nicolas Cage to make the film. So I guess it's kind of a strange, if you think about it too hard as an actor, because it'd be a difficult thing to do, because you could kind of not lose yourself, but it could kind of play with your sense of identity.
He maintains he's playing a character in the movie. He's not playing himself. So he deliberately said,
you have to put a wall up.
It's a heightened meta version and a meta commentary on how people see him and how his career has gone, especially the last 10 or so years.
But also some of his best movies were released in the last 10 or so years. In a way.
Well, that's the thing, is the last 10 or so years, he is all the straight-to-DVD crap. But then you have, once every couple of years, he does the gem. Like he has Mandy or he has Pig, or
Yeah.
even this movie. You know, so it's like you can pick out the quality. The rest is just
Yeah, he's very much a
garbage that
workhorse.
you
So
ignore.
it depends on the script he
Yeah.
gets. Yeah.
it's just like he does so many movies that you just ignore most of them, and then there are things that obviously rise up, and you go, okay, that's something I need to pay attention to. It's what I call his real movies.
Yeah, it's every now and again Nicolas Cage releases a movie when you think, okay, that's why he won the Oscar.
Yeah.
Like the Leaving Las Vegas kind of like
Yeah.
that tentpole movie. We're just like, okay, here's Nicolas Cage reminding everybody that he can still do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that he ever gives a half-assed performance.
You just
Yeah.
quoted him before. It's like not
Yeah.
that I was
Not
ever
that I
gone.
ever
It's like,
lived, yeah.
Not that he was never
Not
bad.
that I went
he was
anywhere,
never
yeah.
he was never gone anywhere. It's just there was questionable choices, money problems.
Well, it's a pretty well known fact that some actors will just do a film for the money so they can afford to
it's
do the art piece.
it's the one for you, one for me kind of thing. It's like
Yeah.
you know a really well known extinguished actor will do like a crappy garbage movie, and you're like, but they get paid out to us, so that then the next movie they do is just a little small indie.
Yeah, they can take a lesser paycheck for a bigger,
Yeah.
a more interesting
Director-
film. Not
Directors
bigger, but-
do it too. It's
Yeah.
like you're
Oh,
like,
Kevin
why
Smith
is this,
did it.
Yeah, it's like, why is this director doing this crappy movie? It's us so they can then do a more personal.
Well, yeah, I mean, he did Cop Out. Kevin Smith.
Yeah, Kevin Smith did it with Cop Out.
Yeah.
For instance, he's
But
the
he also
director example.
really wanted to work with Bruce Willis, so I think and that didn't work out too
Yeah.
well, unfortunately. But yeah, Unbearable Weight is, I think, as a comedy, really good. Him and Pedro Pascal are really hilarious together.
Yeah.
A lot of good jokes, a lot of good sight gags and stuff, and the meta commentary aspect is fun. But when the credits were rolling, I turned to you guys and I said, as a movie, as a script, it's
Yeah.
not very good. It
Yeah.
does what it needs to do.
The strength of this movie is definitely on Cage and
Yeah.
Pedro.
The comedy and the performances, but the actual
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Pedro Pascal's character just kind of disappears at the end. He doesn't feel rounded out. The whole hostage drug lord plot is just there for action to happen. The action scenes themselves aren't very good. They're very serviceable.
They're average, yeah.
It's especially disappointing because there's a lot of meta commentary in the movie, but not in terms of the filmmaking. Like, there were so many parts where I was like, oh, they're going to do the John Woo face-off thing because they keep mentioning it. And so I was expecting, slow motion, guys diving with guns, doves coming. They never do it. It's very shooting one way.
Yeah,
cut,
exactly.
Change angle, shooting. They run away. It's like very plain,
Standard,
serviceable action.
I think that's a very good way to put it. Is there's a lot of, we'll say, legacy nostalgia kind of stuff that pays off in the script with dialogue, but as you said, not so much.
Not even. I'm just saying,
no, but nothing in the filmmaking.
Yeah,
There's
nothing in the filmmaking is special or really elevates it or
Yeah.
really ties into the meta aspect of Nicolas Cage's career. But even the script,
As a meditation on Nicolas Cage in Hollywood, it doesn't do a whole lot of meditating, basically. Yeah.
and it's like his whole the character of the daughter and the wife. It's like it's all just kind of there.
Yeah.
And
they're all very much plot points instead of characters.
Like exactly. And at the end, it's just like, oh, it was that like they didn't really flesh it out, or it didn't feel very polished.
As enjoyable as it is.
Yeah.
The story is not its strongest point. The acting is its strong suit.
The comedic scenes.
Yeah.
It's like that's what really.
I will say that
makes it enjoyable.
there is one great scene I think is worth mentioning, is the part where Pascal says to Nicolas Cage, "You're never gonna see me the same way again." When they're opening a locked door because Cage thinks that the hostage is behind it.
Yeah.
And I think
It's a
I leaned
shite
over to you or James like, "Do you think it's like a trophy room?"
Yeah.
And
that part
you
was
were
in
like,
the trailer. So
Yeah.
it's like,
And so anyway, he opens the door and it's like a
worship
shrine to Nicolas
Yeah.
Cage with like lots of original memorabilia from the movies.
Yeah.
And I was like, awesome.
Yeah.
Just awesome. And you see
See,
him go
stuff
through,
like that
and
is
he
fun,
he
yeah.
looks at it and you're just like, yes. Yeah, it was really good. That was like a standout scene for me. But
yeah.
the movie, as good as it is, it's also forgettable's the wrong word.
It's an enjoyable comedy, but as a movie, it's not particularly.
Oh, it's
great.
kind of forgettable. I'd say it's a little forgettable.
It's not forgettable because it's weird. It's a unique film.
It's not forgettable because it was funny and we enjoyed it, and it's got that
but
unique
it's-
meta aspect. But yeah, as a movie, in
like
terms of
the action
filmmaking
is
and the-
forgettable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like-
Is what I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's like you don't really remember any of the big plot points. You remember the funny.
You just remember the Nicolas Cage funny moments.
Yeah, exactly, and the gags. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth checking out. But
yeah,
in
especially
terms of-
after it's released on Blu-ray or whatever, so you can check out those
I hope
sweet
they have
deleted
that
features.
deleted-
Deleted
deleted
scenes.
Well,
scenes,
Nicolas Cage is
'cause-
confirmed is coming on
Yeah.
the Blu-rays.
Yeah, because that's
Yeah.
like talking about the movie after we saw it, and I was like, oh, it needed a bit more in terms of him coming to
Fighting his demons, so to speak.
fighting his younger version and coming to terms with how he's seen and how his career. And then you go on the IMDb, it's like, oh, they had scenes like that, but cut them out. I'm like, well, that's why the movie isn't as good as it
Also,
should be.
one interesting thing about this movie, it's the first movie since the 80s that he's been credited at his birth name.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, Coppola?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
I always forget,
because
yeah.
obviously he wanted to distance himself from his famous relatives
Yeah.
with filmmaking.
Yeah.
And,
I always forget that he's a Coppola.
and with this
He's
movie,
named after Luke Cage. His stage name is named after Luke Cage because he's a
okay.
big comic book nerd.
Yeah.
So he took-
this is the first movie since like 1986 or something like that.
Earlier, I think.
Earlier,
Yeah.
that he's actually been credited as Nicholas Kim Coppola
Yeah.
because he plays like
As Nicky, the young version.
yeah. That's it. I just thought
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's like
yeah.
the distancing of himself to
The
the actual
identity
character,
protection, yeah.
Yeah.
but also like a meta commentary on his career. He started as a Coppola and then didn't want to ride off those coattails, and
Yeah.
he kind of made it on his own in a certain way. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good comedy, and
Did enjoy it, not perfect,
Yeah,
but
I was-
still pretty good. Will be better with the deleted scenes.
I mean, I'm
Maybe,
just
yeah.
glad we got to see it in the theaters.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's always good to have a good Nicolas Cage movie because there are so many bad ones.
It's just good to see a Nicolas Cage movie at the cinemas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, I would have loved to have seen Pig at the cinemas. Like that's a
Yeah.
perfect. I feel like that's a perfect
that's-
cinema drama. You know what I mean?
it's a good looking movie, but it's not necessarily a masterpiece.
It's not a-
visual,
it's not a
spectacle.
popcorn big.
Like, yeah,
Yeah,
man.
like it would have looked great on the big screen, but it's like you didn't. Not
Yeah.
necessarily. Mandy would have been great on the big screen.
Yeah.
because of the whole psychedelic,
Yeah,
colourful.
Mandy
visuals.
would have been insane.
Should have got a wider release, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I was talking about it to someone, and I was just like, if you're not familiar with at least the main Nicolas Cage movies, Con Air, Face Off, Leaving Las Vegas, even Raising Arizona, stuff like that. If you're not familiar with those, then this movie probably won't make a lot of sense. Not that you can't watch it, but you have to have at least some passing knowledge of. But I guess if you watch it just as a fiction, like if this guy wasn't real, I guess, he's a washed-up actor, he's having a hard
Yeah.
time. I guess you could watch it from that aspect.
But watch the classics anyway if you haven't seen them.
Oh, if you haven't seen
Yeah.
those, what are you doing with your life? Stop listening to this.
Yeah, go watch the
Con
classics.
Air. I love
yeah.
that movie. Put the bonnet down. Oh, man.
I think we're all out of time tonight,
Yes.
guys. Thank you for listening, everybody. Please like and share the Tuesday Review Facebook page, the Twitter, the Instagrams, all the
Yeah.
socials. Contact us if you'd like. Give us your comments.
Yeah, we're not particularly active on social media, but
If you message
if
us,
you
we'll
have-
see it.
Yeah, if you have anything you want to talk about, then just let us know.
We'll be back next week, and we might have a special guest in the studio.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you'll have to listen.
Don't
and
hype
see.
it up because it's going to be disappointing.
Yeah, it'll be Christian, the silent producer.
Oh, the
You'll
silent-
never know the
You-
difference.
You wouldn't even know he's there.
Thanks everybody for listening. Adios, cousins.